Hello, fourth year students. Today we are going to talk about the assessment of the last skill that foreign learners need to acquire when learning a foreign language, and this skill is writing. So, writing is important in many ways or for different reasons. It is one of the important skills, the essential skills that people use in communication. So speaking is not, or meeting people face to face and speaking to them is not the only way throughout which people communicate with each other. They may communicate throughout writing. Also, writing is important because many institutions, especially the higher education institutions, they seek the ability of students in writing well. And at the same time, when you apply for a job, okay, some or certain companies and institutions also require that their employers or employees, sorry, should have a good writing skill. This means that teaching and assessing writing is important, especially when we are talking about the field of learning a foreign language. The assessment of writing has been developed considerably over the past 50 years. Different techniques, okay, and approaches have been set to assess writing, and we are going to touch upon the most important ones. So if we are talking about the approaches to writing assessment, in fact, we can talk about two main ones. The first one is called the indirect measure of writing assessment. Why do we call it indirect? Because here we are measuring the ability of our students in writing on the sentence level. And here we are assessing the components of writing. You know that in order to write well, you have to master a number of components of language, like spelling, using punctuation correctly, a mastery of the grammatical structure of language, okay, the use of the correct vocabulary, and so on. So when we are measuring the ability of our students as far as writing is concerned, within the indirect approach, in fact, we are measuring these components, the mastery of our students in these components, in terms of spelling, good spelling, the good use of punctuation marks, the well grammatical sentences, and the use of the correct vocabulary. So, as you see here, I put in the PDF that I posted throughout the Google Classroom a number of examples that teachers use to follow or used to have in their exams and when they want to test the writing ability of their students. I'm going here to show you some of the examples, some of them, not all of them. Some of them, for example, you can see that there is a technique called copying. In here, you can see that the teacher is actually testing the handwriting of his or her students, how to write certain letters, words, or punctuation marks. So the teacher here, as you see in this example, is giving his or her students a number of words, and he's asking them to copy them in order to check how well they write the letters and the punctuation marks. Also, you can test writing within listening and within reading, okay, within other skills like listening and reading. For example, if you remember, we talked about the use of the cloze test in both of the testing listening and testing reading. If you remember, we said that a closed test means that we are having a passage which is incomplete. Some of its elements or its parts, sentences are deleted, and the job of the student is to comprehend, to understand that the whole passage, the meaning of the whole passage, and then write the deleted elements. But such a closed test can be used in what? Testing listening and reading. So when you are here testing your students with the listening and reading, in fact, you are not only testing their ability in listening comprehension or reading comprehension, but you are also testing their ability in writing as far as spelling, punctuation, and meaning is concerned. Another example of the use or how to test or assess your students' ability in writing in an indirect way. For example, you can give them numbers, okay, and you ask them to change these numbers into words, or you give them whole words and you ask them to change them into abbreviations, or the opposite. You can give them the abbreviation and you ask them to write them in the original words. So this is also what a test of writing. Another example is the use of the multiple choice. And here you see it is said that it is a reading, writing, spelling test. So you see here there is a connection between two skills, writing and reading. And if in fact you are testing writing within reading, so this is an indirect way of testing writing. So as you see here in this example, the teacher is giving the students or the test takers a sentence, and in a form or an item in a form of a multiple choice in which the stem is missing a word, and within the options A, B, C, D, he or she is giving them a number of options related to what? To the correct spelling of the missing word. So you see here he was testing spelling, and the spelling is a component of writing. Another example is using pictures. Okay, so you can give your students a picture or a number of pictures, and you ask them either to write individual sentences about each picture or even words. Okay, you ask them to write a word to express the picture, or a sentence, or sometimes you give them one picture and you ask them to write a whole paragraph describing or making a story about the picture. So this is again the use of pictures can be used in what? In testing writing. Or you can give them a number of pictures which are scrambled, which means that they are put in a wrong order, and you ask your students to either write or to scramble them, to unscramble them, which means to put them in the correct order by using sentences, or by writing what? A paragraph. Okay, so you see here another technique for the indirect measure of writing is what the use is throughout the use of pictures. Another example is throughout the use of the short answer and sentence completion task. So when you ask your students WH questions, a short answer question, so you expect them from them to write a sentence. And when they write a sentence and you come to score or to correct their answers, you are going to check. One of the things that you are going to check is the spelling, okay, and writing meaningful sentences. So these are what? Components of writing. So you see here in these examples, some of the sentences are incomplete, and so the job of the students is to complete them. So here the student will have to what? To write, okay, or in the third sentence, sorry, in the third question, for example, restate the following sentences in your words using the underlined words. So the teacher here is giving his student or her students a sentence, and he's asking or she's asking them to rewrite the sentence again by using the words or the underlined ones. So here They have first of all to understand, read the sentence, understand its meaning, and then understand how to use the new word to make or to write a new sentence. So this is what also again an indirect way of testing writing. The second approach that is used by teachers in testing writing is called what? The direct approach. And here within the direct approach, or why do we call it direct approach? Because here the teacher is going to ask his or her student to write, okay, write a text, okay, whether this text is going to be in a form of a paragraph, a composition, or an essay about a certain topic. And when the teacher is going to score the products of his or her students, he or she is going to check all the components of writing. And when we say components, we mean in fact vocabulary, grammatical structures, the punctuation marks, syntax, and so as well as the content, the idea, the coherence, and the cohesion that form the text. So this is the direct approach to writing assessment. Okay, so because the direct approach to writing assessment is so popular and so common nowadays, and so familiar to all the teachers of the foreign language, especially English, it is very important to understand how to make a good question in which you ask your students to write a paragraph or a composition or an essay, or what are the components of this question. The first component or the first part of the question is called the rubric. I want you here to identify between the rubric that we use here in testing writing and the rubric that we use in scoring. Rubric is also we know, or we have used this term generally in as a scale that we use in scoring the speaking skill of our students or the writing skill of our students. At the same time, this term rubric can be used to identify or to refer to the instruction for carrying out the writing task. So the instruction that you give for your students in the writing task or in the writing question is called what? Is called the rubric. And here within the rubric, or what are the criteria that make or help you write a good and meaningful rubric for your teacher, for your students, are the following. First of all, within the rubric, you have to specify the rhetorical pattern. What does it mean, rhetorical pattern? Which type of discourse that you want your students to write the paragraph or composition or essay into? Do you want them to compare, to contrast, to describe, to write an argumentative essay or composition, and so on? So this is the meaning of the rhetorical pattern. Then you decide for them within the instruction, within the form of the question, the length of the writing desired. Whether you want them to write a paragraph or a composition or an essay. Okay, if it is going to be a composition or an essay, how many paragraphs? Or if you want them to write a paragraph, how many words? Okay. Also, the amount you determine for them in the rubric, the amount of time that is allowed for them to complete the task. Also, you can indicate for them the resources. Some teachers may indicate for them the resources that they can use in writing their paragraph or writing their text. For example, some institutions allow their students to bring things with them to the exam room, like their laptops, dictionaries, and so on. Indicate whether a draft or an outline is required. You know that before we write, first of all, it is very important to make an outline for your writing, especially if you are writing a long text like a composition or an essay, you have to arrange them into parts, and you have to decide what is the content of each part. Okay, uh, for example, you should first of all have an introductory paragraph, then you have the body, and then you have the conclusion. Okay, so within this outline, you have to decide what are you going to put in the introductory. You are going to talk about what in the introductory paragraph, in the first paragraph. Decide your topic sentence, for example. Then within the body, how many paragraphs you are going to have to in the body, and what are you going to include in each one of these paragraphs. And finally, the conclusion. So this is what we call it, the outline. Some teachers, okay, when they are teaching writing according to the process approach, which we are going to explain later, they can ask their students, first of all, to provide with their test, with the final product, okay, with the final text, the outline that they have put, the plan they have put already for answering the question. Okay, also within the rubric, you should put what? Put the score. How much how much of the score, of the total score of the exam, you are going to specify for the question of writing. So all these are going to be included within what? Within the instruction. Now we go to the second part or component of the direct question, or the direct approach to assess writing, which is what? The writing prompt. Within the writing prompt, here you are giving a situation, okay, for your students, and you ask them to write about it, to write an essay or a composition or a paragraph, which means the topic. Okay, so again, we have three types of this prompt. For example, there is the base prompt. In the base prompt here, you are directly telling your students to write about this paragraph, or to write about a certain topic. For example, you ask them, or you say, for example, discuss, okay, the advantages and the disadvantages of wearing uniforms at college. You see, so this is what a base prompt, in which you directly state the topic that you want your students to write a paragraph or essay about. Yes. Number two, it can be a framed prompt. What does it mean, a framed prompt? In the framed prompt, you are presenting your students with a situation, okay, and you ask them to write, okay, what would they do if they were put in such a situation. While the last one is the text-based prompts, in which you present your students with a text or with a situation, and you ask them to respond, okay, for this situation. For example, you ask them to if, for example, you ask them, you tell them that your friend is in danger, or your friend needs your help, and I want you to write a letter or to write an email to this friend, to tell him that you are ready to help him whenever he needs your help. So this is a text-based prompt. Okay, then we go to the what? Before we go to the third one, remember that, or in the PDF, you are going to find what is called signposts. What do I mean by signposts? The signposts are the verbs that you can use in writing the prompts, and making them, or stating clearly for your students what you need them to do. For example, one of the signpost verbs that you can use in making a good prompt, for writing prompt for your students, is to say them describe. So describe is a verb that usually we teachers use at the beginning of a writing a question for their students, in which they ask them to write what a descriptive essay or a descriptive paragraph. So when they see a certain verb, they know that the type of the paragraph or the type of the text that they have to write about this is explained or stated clearly in this verb. For example, we can say describe, we can say discuss, we can say explain, compare, contrast, analyze, define, summarize, evaluate, and each one of them, before you have a test with your students, you have, of course, or you should have as a teacher, explain for them the difference between these verbs and what they should do when they find each one of them. Okay, what type of a text they should write when they see or find each of these verbs in the writing a question. Okay, now moving on to the third component or the third part of the writing a question or the writing task, it is what the expected response. What is the expected response? It is a description of what the teacher intends the students to do with the writing task. So before communicating information on the expected response to the students, the teacher must have a clear picture of the type of response the assessment task should generate. So when you put your question, okay, you as a teacher should expect what type of text that you want your students or you are going to get from your students. Of course, why? How can you expect? Because you have already taught them that. So within the course, and this is the what we have focused on more than once. What you test, you should have already taught to your students. Do not test anything that you didn't teach them. Finally, there is the post-task of evaluation. So what does this mean? It means that evaluate the effectiveness of the writing task of your students. And here we can say that the good writing tasks are likely to produce positive responses to the following questions. So when you get the answers of your students and you score them, out of these scores you are going to analyze these results that you have got, okay, by asking yourself as a teacher 3 important questions. What are they? Did the prompt discriminate well among my students? Okay, did the prompt that you have used in your question was able to identify between the good student and the bad student, the high level student and the low level students? Okay, were the essays easy to read and evaluate? What about for you as a teacher? When you have the responses or the answers of your students, were they easy for you to score them, to mark them? And were students able to write their potential and show what they know or not? Okay, so these are the 3 important questions that you have to ask yourself after you got the answers of your students and score them. So these are, as we say, the 4 important components of the writing assessment question. Within. Now, when we make a writing assessment for our students, we have to take care of the following important factors. First of all, time allocation. What does it mean? It means that when you ask your students to write something in an exam, whether it is a formative exam or a summative exam at the end of the year or the course, you have to make sure that they have enough time to complete the writing task. You know that writing task takes longer time than the other parts of the questions, that more than the multiple choice questions, the short answer questions, the reading questions, the listening questions, and so on. So when you are making or assessing your students in the skill of writing, you have to give them enough time to finish or to complete the task. Researchers say that it is enough or to give your students at least 30 minutes, okay, to finish the writing assessment question. Number 2, process versus product. We have focused on this more than once. We said that you should test in the same way that you have taught your students before. So, teaching writing. If we come now to teaching writing, writing is taught throughout two main approaches, either process or product. What is the difference between them? When you teach your students according to the process approach, this means you are interested in the steps that the students are following in order to arrive or to generate the last or the final product of them, like a paragraph or a composition or an essay. So you know that when we write, we should follow steps. We are not if a teacher is asking us to write something, to write a paragraph or essay, we do not directly take a pencil and a paper and write and that's it. No, we have to follow certain steps. Like for instance, for the first one is brainstorming. What does it mean, brainstorming? Brainstorming is what collecting the ideas, the possible ideas that can help us to, or we can include in the text about a certain topic. Then, so you have ideas. What should you do with them? Second step is to arrange them, okay? To arrange them in parts. You know, as we said before, the paragraph or the composition or the essay should be arranged into parts, starting with the introduction, which is, for example, in the paragraph, it is what the topic sentence, okay? Then we have a body, and then we have a conclusion. So this is the outline. Put an outline and decide what are you going to put in each one, what type of ideas, what kind of language you are going to use in each one of them. And finally, and then number 3, you are now starting to write. Put the ideas and make or achieve the outline that you have put. And then, of course, this is not the last. This is only a draft. After you finish writing, you are going to make a revision, okay, in order to see that or to check out everything that you have put in your text concerning grammar, spelling, the necessary ideas, the suitable ones, the non-suitable ones. You can delete things, you can add things. This is called what? The revision, until we arrive at the final one. So this is the approach, the process approach to teaching writing. When teachers teach their students according to the process approach, they should test them within the same or according to the same approach, which means that when you test your students, okay, you have to ask them to provide you not only with the final product, with the final text, but also with what the steps, okay, the things that they have made for before writing the text. Okay, so first of all, they should provide you with with the ideas that they have collected about the things within the brainstorming step, the outline, the draft, until they arrived at the last form of the paragraph. But if you are teaching your students according to the product approach, what does it mean, a product approach? Here, the teacher is not interested in in the steps that you have to follow before writing the text. He or she is more interested in in the final text that you have produced, because this is what they are going to give you the score for. So you have first of all to decide which approach that you are going to follow in teaching writing, And when you are going to decide this approach in teaching, you have to also to follow the same approach in what? In testing. Okay? Number 3, topic restriction. What does it mean, topic restriction? Topic restriction is the belief that all students should be asked to write on the same topic with no alternatives allowed. So, some teachers, when they give the question or the writing question for their students within the English test or exam, they either ask their students to write about one specific topic, or they may give them 2 or 3 options and ask them to choose one of them and write a paragraph or essay or a composition about. So here we are, we want to know which one is better. Is it to give them one topic and make all the students write a text about it, or give them alternatives, options? So they say here that each one of them has advantages and disadvantages. When you are giving your students only one alternative, here they say that you are limiting the choices for them. Also, you are helping them not to waste their time. You know that it is at the time of the exam is limited. So when your students, when you are giving your students more than one idea to write about in the writing question, most of the time is going to be wasted on choosing which one is going to be easier to write, or which one they know better than the other option. So they say that in order to help your student not to waste their time and to focus on answering the questions, it is better to give them, okay, one topic only. Also, they say that it is better to give them one topic only in order to in order to make or have a general idea about what all the students level concerning the use of a certain vocabulary and grammatical structures and explaining and ideas concerning one topic only. But at the same time, there is a disadvantage in that when you give one topic only for all the students, you are not going to be sure 100% that all the students know about this topic, or how to write about this topic, or have a background knowledge about this topic. So the other groups of the researchers believe that it is better to give them alternatives, options, and allow the students to choose the one that they think they know about, or they have a background knowledge about, they know how to write about, and in this way you are going to reduce the anxiety that they have because of the exam. So when you decide to allow your students to select a topic from a variety of alternatives, make sure that your alternative topics are the same genre and rhetorical pattern. So don't make one of the options, for example, a descriptive one and the other is a story. Of course, all of them, they are going to choose a story because it is easier to make a story. Okay, no, both of if you are giving 2 or 3 alternatives, all of them should be, for example, descriptive essays, descriptive composition, or argumentative, or writing the stories, all of them. Not one of them is from writing about asking them to write a story about a certain situation and the other is describing something, and so on. In this way here, you are giving your students or you are checking the performance of your students in writing one genre or one rhetorical pattern of writing. Is it clear? And you are also making sure of that you are asking your students to write about 3 different topics, but all of them can be familiar for your students. They all have some background knowledge about at least one of them. Okay, so these are the 3 important things that you need to make sure of or to consider when you put a writing question for your students. Now we come to the techniques of the direct writing assessment. What do you mean again? What do you mean by the direct measure of writing assessment? That you ask your students to write a text, whether this text is going to be a paragraph, a composition, or an essay. But again, within the direct measure or the direct approach to writing assessment, we can use, or the teachers can use, 2 types of techniques, either the guided writing or the free writing. Free writing means that you give your students a situation or a topic and you ask them to write about it. So you are not limiting for them the rhetorical pattern, the genre. You are not limiting for them the length, okay, and you are not limiting for them the type of the structures or the vocabulary that they have to use in their writing. So they are free. Some of the students may approach or may write about the topic, or may write the topic in the form of a story. The others may write it in the form of a descriptive essay, and so on. And of course, the type of language they are going to be used in each of these genres are different. The vocabulary are different. So here they are free to write or to approach the topic that you decided to write about in any a way that is suitable for their level in language and their thinking. But what about the guided? No, within the guided writing, here, the teacher is requiring the students to manipulate content that is provided in the prompt, usually in the form of a chart or a diagram. So you give them a certain content, whether this content is explained for them in a sentence or in a chart or in a picture, and you ask them to write about it a text. But here you are going to specify for them the things that they have to use in their writing. For example, you specify for them the length of their writing, whether you want 1 paragraph or 2 paragraphs, the number of words, okay? Also, you ask them to provide particular information. For example, you can ask them to give reasons and the effects or the results for these reasons. Or you ask them to write the text about the topic that you suggested in a form of a certain discourse pattern or a certain genre. Like, for example, you ask them to make a comparison and contrast between 2 things or 2 people. Is it clear? For example, this is one of the examples that here can be used by teachers in the guided writing. Suppose that you have taught your students a certain story in the textbook. In the exam, you can ask questions, certain questions, WH questions, short answer questions about this story, but you ask them to write it in the form of what? Of a paragraph. So as you see here, in the teacher is asking certain questions and is putting between the brackets, okay, at the end of each question, the type of information that he or she needs the students to put in their answer. For example, in the question number 1, where did this story take place? So here, he wants them or she wants them to include or to talk about the setting. So this is guided writing. And here, by the guided writing again, what do you mean? That the teacher is specifying for the students what they should include in their writing. So they are not free to include anything. Now, when we finish, or when the students have finished answering the questions, here it is the job of the teacher to score the answers. So how do teachers score the writing assessment task? There are two types of scoring, either the holistic marking or the analytic marking. What do you mean by the holistic or the impressionistic marking? It is a type of scoring that involves assigning the score to the whole text. In other words, assigning of a single score to whole piece of writing on the basis of the overall or general impression of the text. Okay, so you are giving a score or a mark to the writing of your student depending on the general impression that you are having about it. But when we come to the analytic marking, we are going to see the opposite. What does it involve? Analytic marking involves the scoring of the individual parts that make up the text. You remember we said that when students write, they use what? Grammar, vocabulary, mechanics of writing, capitalization, punctuation. They have to write in correct spelling. Okay, there should be organization. The content should be organized well. Ideas, unity, coherence, cohesion, all these things make up the writing skill. So when students write, they have to what? To make sure, or they have to use all these things. And when you come to score their products as a teacher, you have to give some weight of the score to each one of them. For example, if you decide that the question of writing is going to be out of 20, so for vocabulary, how much you are going to give from 20 to vocabulary? How much you are going to give from the 20 for the grammar, for the organization of ideas, for the mechanics of writing, for the spelling, and so on. So this is called what? Analytic writing. Okay? Now, pay attention that each one of them is having advantages and disadvantages. And you can see that the advantages and the disadvantage for each one of these ways or methods of scoring explained in detail in the PDF. For example, they say that one of the advantages of the scoring of the holistic marking or holistic scoring, that it is generally perceived to be quicker, faster than the analytic. Of course, when you are reading the written product of your students, and you are not paying attention to the components of the writing, you are not paying attention to the grammatical mistakes, to the spelling mistakes, to the mistakes and punctuation or spelling. So this means that you are not scoring the text, or the writing of your students will not take so much time. But if you are going to pay attention to all these components, of course this will take, or it is going to be time consuming. But at the same time, when you are not measuring the ability of your students in using the correct vocabulary, or in writing, spelling well, or in using the correct organization of the ideas, here you are not going to have a good idea about the level of the performance of your students, how well they did, which one was good and which one had done bad. Is it clear? So you see, each one of them is having its own advantages and disadvantages. You can decide which one to follow depending on the circumstances that you have at that time. For example, if you are teaching advanced students, here you can follow what? You can follow with them the holistic. If you are teaching large number of students, for example, 100 or 200 students, of course, the holistic marking is going to be better. Okay? But if you are teaching a limited number of students, if you are having so much time to correct their answers, to score their answers. If you are teaching beginners, okay, of course, the analytic marking or score method of scoring will be better. So you, as a teacher here, is going to decide which method of scoring is going to be suitable depending on the circumstances that you have. Okay. In the PDF, I put for you a very well-known rubric or rating scale that usual teachers around the world can be used in what and if they choose to follow or to adopt the analytic marking in their writing test with their students. Now, the last thing we have to pay attention to are these things, which are, first of all, the classroom teacher as rater. So, should we make the classroom teacher correct or score the answers of his or her students, or we ask another teacher to do that? Here, we can have two different ideas or two different opinions. For example, some people say that it is better to let the classroom teacher to correct or to score the answers of his or her students because they know them better. But at the same time, because they know, the teacher knows his or her students better than anyone, the teacher may bias toward one of them or against one of them, because he likes or dislikes this certain students. Okay, so what is the best thing? The best thing is to allow the teacher, the classroom teacher, to do the rating for his or her students, but at the same time there should be a double blind marking. What does it mean? That the teacher is marking the writing assignment or the writing test of his or her students, but he doesn't know the name. Okay, the name is not given for the teacher. Multiple raters. What does mean multiple raters? In order to overcome the problem of subjectivity in marking or scoring this the writing products of our students, is it good to make the same text or written exam scored by more than one teacher or only one teacher? Here they said that it is recommended that you should have or you ask another teacher to mark the same compositions or the same writings for your students. They say that it is better, or it is believed that multiple judgments lead to a final score that is closer to a true score than any single judgment. Okay, if you are having more than one judgment for the same writing, they say that it can be closer to the true score than the one than if you give the one score only, or if you by yourself correct the writing exam for your students. Finally, responding to student writing. When you score your students' writing, please put your feedback on the writing answers or the answers of your students. Do not only write the score, okay? Do not only put circles and underline things. So when the students are going to get their papers and check their answers, how do they know? What do these circles mean? What do these lines mean? And if you are not even lining or putting circles, you are only putting the final score. So why? Why did they get this score? So students need to know their mistakes. Why? Because this will help them to improve, to check, to revise their own work, and to improve, to overcome, not to make the same mistakes again and again. Okay. So they say that some teachers, they use so much. They rewrite the sentences, the incorrect sentences again for their students. And here the answers sheet of the students will be messy, will be full of things. Again, it is going to be, because it is going to be messy, the students are not going to understand anything from what from the scoring of his or her students teacher, sorry. So what is here? It is recommended for teachers to use what? To uh, use a correction code. Okay, what does it mean, a correction code? You see here in this picture. So instead of writing for them the correct spelling of the word, if you see that they misspell any word, put for them this SP, and they will know, or you have to explain, of course, before the test, that if you see SP, this means that this word is misspelled, or you have a spelling mistake here. Okay, for example, another example for punctuation. If they do not put or do not use, or they misuse the punctuation mark, put P. P means punctuation needed here, or punctuation mistake. Okay, NS, a new sentence needed here. Grammar, poor grammar. If you are finding that they have grammatical mistakes, so put GR. This means that grammatical mistakes or poor grammar. Okay, so you see here, in order to make it easy for you as a teacher when you score the papers of your students, and again for them, in order to understand their mistakes, use these types of codes. Do not rewrite everything for them again. These things are part of the feedback that is too much necessary from the teacher to put on the papers of his or her students when he corrects or she corrects them, because as we said, it is very important for them to know their mistakes in order to improve them, and not to repeat making the same mistakes again and again. So with this, we have finished talking about the final, or the assessment of the final skill that we have, which is assessing writing. Thank you.